Good morning, Carolyn Shapiro.
Good morning, Dr. David, whatever your middle name is, Rosensweet. How are you? It's always good to see you in these mornings.
You too, Carolyn.
And you sent me a very funny email, I thought, this morning. And you got me laughing, and I love to laugh. So thank you for that. Yeah. And also, before we get started, thank you so much for the interview with Dr. Kira Barr. That was fabulous.
Yeah, that was fun. It was special. It was very special. We'll interview Dr. Kira some more too, because she's rich and she's good.
Oh, don't I know?
Rich in who she is.
Indeed. That smile. You see that, and you're just in love, you know? You're like, wow, you're amazing. And she is amazing. Her whole spirit, everything. I don't know. It's a wonderful village, I think, that we have.
Growing
and growing.
Yeah.
You know, it's nothing better. Who would have ever guessed, honestly? Weird. Weirder yet, I have these questions. It's the strangest thing. Like, they come through. Zillions of them. So I've seen.
And I don't know if you can improve the focus of your video. It's unusual, Carolyn. It always comes in so clear. But never mind. Let's start with the questions.
Okay. I seem to look okay to me.
Okay, good.
Okay. So good morning to the women. Welcome. And again, good morning, Dr. R. Question number 1. Is it possible for a woman who is taking progesterone to still be estrogen dominant?
Yeah. Next question.
Next question. Okay. Move to the bottom.
And let me explain why.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
This is the kind of situation that if I had more information from the actual questioner, I could zero in more specifically on what's going on for her. But here's some of the general issues involved. No matter what stage a woman is at her life, for example, she could be 25 and regularly menstruating or irregularly menstruating. She could be 35 and starting to get symptoms that she didn't have before. She could be 45. She could be 55. She could be 65 being treated with hormones. The word estrogen dominance suggests a phenomena where estrogen is not being properly dealt with. In fact, it suggests, relatively speaking, there's too much estrogen.
Right.
And that is very possible. And there's several reasons for that. Like a 25-year-old woman can have too much estrogen, relatively speaking. And here's why. There's the normal amount of estrogen that occurs in a normal, healthy woman's cycle at 25. However, there's this critter called the biology of the stress response, the fight or flight goody.
The saber-tooth tiger.
Yeah, back in the day, Carolyn Shapiro could be walking down Happy Lane 3,000 years ago, carrying her club and her basket of berries.
I do that anyway.
You do?
No.
Walking down Happy Lane, having gathered your basket of berries.
With my club.
With your club. Just in case a saber-toothed tiger pops out of the bushes.
I'm kind of not kidding. Like, I've been there. Yeah.
And that saber-toothed tiger is serious. It wants something that you may not want to give it, called you be that saber-toothed tiger's lunch.
Right.
And what happens is, biologically, a flip is switched, and all of a sudden, Carolyn Shapiro can become ferocious in a way that she didn't even know about herself.
Right.
She can become so ferocious that she can run from that saber-toothed tiger faster than the saber-toothed tiger can run. or she can turn on that saber-toothed tiger and start wielding her club and scare and back down the saber-toothed tiger because Carolyn Shapiro is so fierce. Well, where does that kind of response come from? There's a lot of biology to it. And
Yes.
the that we're most familiar with is the rush of adrenaline and cortisol that do so many things that you have the juice and the metabolic juice to be able to do something extraordinary. In fact, mothers have been known to lift cars off of trapped children.
Yes.
Where do you get that strength?
Right.
Well, there's biology to it.
Right.
But there's more to it than just that adrenaline and cortisol response. Other energizing hormones are recruited. Oh, guess what? Estrogen is an energizing hormone. And it can be called into action. And I've given this example before. When you look at the Olympics on TV, if you do that, you're looking at these phenomenal women athletes. And you might ask yourself the question, how many of them are menstruating? And what you don't know is a lot of them are not menstruating because their training programs are so intense and so rigorous that they're not only using their normal metabolism to get themselves to that level of performance day by day in their training program, they're recruiting other energizing hormones. And instead of the estrogen going down the normal female pathway, so much of it is recruited to go down the training, Olympic training pathway.
Right.
And when you look at a lot of these women, a lot of them are not menstruating because there's not enough estrogen to do the female things. In fact, very often, not always, they don't have very significant breast development, other things as well.
So
estrogen dominance can occur if a woman is stressed. So if a 25-year-old woman is stressed, she can be recruiting estrogen into her system.
Okay.
And thus have an excess flow of estrogen.
Right.
And it's there because of the stress response, and it shouldn't be there.
Exactly. I was just going to say, so you can be doing that without even knowing it and think you're just happily living your life. Maybe not so happily if you're so stressed, but let's say you just have this notion to add some progesterone in for whatever reason.
Let me get there in just a minute. You got it. You're naming the thing.
Yeah. Well,
but just know that a young woman, 25 years old, or 35 years old, or 45 years old, or 75 years old, if there's estrogen available, it can be recruited for the stress response. What's the medicine?
Okay. Yeah.
You don't want to do that.
Yeah,
what's the remedy for this stuff?
Right.
You take on the project called your own personal healing and growth.
Yeah.
Where you acquire information and tools and practices that helps you deal in a much more successful way with the stresses of life. Notice I'm not saying get rid of the stresses of life. No, that's part of being a human being. There's value to the stresses, but we can respond to those stresses in an exaggerated, panicked, unbiologically successful way, and that it's going to have estrogen dominance, and you're going to get overstimulation from estrogen, and you're going to get breast tenderness, you're going to get cramps, you're going to get PMS. So that's one thing, is improve your tools at the youngest age you possibly can. Like, I'm so proud of my granddaughters, 20 and 17, Maya and Molly. They're acquiring these skills at a young age. They know as much as at their age about how to deal with stress that I knew when I was eventually learned when I was in my 40s. So that's the thing. Young women, women of all ages, acquire the information, tools, and support that you're dealing far more successfully with the stresses of life, and you are not triggering the biology, the biochemistry of the stress response. Otherwise, you're going to supercharge estrogen, and you're also going to rob your testosterone, because that's very energizing as well, and your libido is going to disappear, as are your muscles. So,
it's something we don't, or we didn't, let's just say, talk about. We didn't in my family, and we should have, because it was a medical family and whatever, right? I mean, who knew? And so this is so important, I think. really to discuss all the time and get women to get tested at a young age, at least to see where hormones at, deal with the
Well,
stress.
not so much, you don't have to do so much testing. Like if a young woman starts complaining of severe period cramps or other elements of PMS, or she's starting to get breast tenderness and breast pain, she is getting overstimulated by estrogen output. Her
Okay, well,
ovaries,
that's
her
huge.
ovaries are healthy enough to put out some extra estrogen.
Right.
And so we don't need to test her. That alone, breast tenderness, period cramps, PMS, endometriosis, all of it. It's all excessive estrogen. Now you
Wow.
brought up another mechanism for this. Progesterone is there to balance the effects of estrogen. Estrogen is stimulatory. Bravo. Progesterone is calming. It's the ultimate calmer. And in a young, healthy woman, she's got a certain amount of estrogen output every cycle. And she's got a robust amount of progesterone output. I mean, 100 times milligram per milligram progesterone is there in every cycle that she ovulates.
Right.
And that system, unfortunately, doesn't function like we would like it to. For example, we know that it's a very common phenomenon, as we outline in the book. I describe, and why don't you give a plug for the book that you post as a free copy of the PDF version. You can wind up fatiguing that robust progesterone output. And here you are, you're putting out a lot of estrogen with the stresses, and you're no longer rising to the occasion of putting out adequate progesterone, because what we know scientifically is progesterone output can decline earlier and deeper than estrogen decline that takes place with birthdays, with increasing age. No, it's been strained, and that's why it's not happening. And you're going to know this for sure if, for example, you're a young woman and you've always had regular periods, and then you start getting irregular in your 30s. If your periods are regular, there's a high likelihood that that beautiful cat over your right ear
it's all backwards.
It's a wonderful visual. Pardon me for drifting.
It's sorry.
It's beautiful. It's amazing. It caught my attention so much that I went, look at that. What kind of planet do I live on? I get to look at Carolyn Shapiro, and I get to look at this gorgeous cat that's staring out into space.
They come around when we do. It's hilarious. I mean, my menopause cats.
So I will return now to progesterone. If you're a young woman and you're not your periods get irregular, here's what's happening. It's very likely you're not ovulating anymore. And if you don't ovulate, your progesterone output is nil.
Right. It's totally tanked, huh?
Yeah. Because you need to ovulate to produce those robust amounts. When I said 100 times as much progesterone, milligram per milligram, that only occurs if a woman ovulates. And if your period's getting irregular, and it used to be irregular, you're not ovulating anymore. Right. Now, that's an extreme example.
Okay.
There's an intermediary example where the progesterone output from the ovary is just not what it wants. The old grade mare ain't what she used to be. They wrote a song about that.
Yes, I remember that
song.
That's
a very politically incorrect thing for me to say. Well, males are getting declined. The old gray mule mare, the old gray, whatever you call a male horse, ain't what it used to be too. I mean, come on now. Why is Viagra so immensely popular out there? I was talking to a man yesterday. He started giving himself testosterone shots in his 40s. So this is not a female thing. I mean, our program is about menopause, right? But it's happening to males too. So don't feel like you're being isolated out. And Viagra sales are just like, it was one of the most popular drugs that have ever occurred, because men are losing their testosterone, so they're losing their erection. And they're doing it earlier and earlier and earlier. But sorry to digress. Far be it from me to ever want to digress. Oh my
No,
God.
no, not you.
Not me.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but a question came in that I want to get to quickly. It said, I've heard of progesterone steal during stress. So the stress response of estrogen compounds this problem. Am I right?
Well, I like explaining it the way I did because biologically and biochemically, that's a fun metaphor used for many things. I mean, that was co-opted from the cortisol steal.
Yes.
And so, but I don't want us to think of it in those terms. I want you to get the basics down.
Okay.
So I mentioned the basics. Number one, you can have estrogen dominance because you've ramped up your healthy ovaries estrogen production because you're stressed and you're recruiting extra estrogen to deal with the saber-toothed tiger or your work situation or the relationship situation or your economic situation, whatever you're doing it for. That's number A. Never mind steal. We sort of invent that word steal. So I don't want us to think in those terms.
Okay.
Here's option B. A young woman used to be regularly menstruating and she's not anymore. And she's now irregularly menstruating, and that means the likelihood that she's still ovulating is extremely low.
Right.
And if she's ovulating, she's producing close to nil. So even though she's putting out estrogen, and even though she's, let's say in this case, 37, and she's putting out less estrogen than she ever did, because remember, everybody, a woman's ovarian output peaks when she's 20. And then it continues to decline. So by the time she's 37, she's not putting out as much estrogen. Yet she can still be estrogen dominant because she stopped ovulating. She's at less estrogen than she ever was. Right. But she still can be estrogen dominant because she stopped producing progesterone. These are two extreme situations. Let me give you a third one. That is, she's still ovulating, she's still menstruating regularly, but she's just not putting out the robust amount of progesterone that she used to. And thus, she's putting out this excess at a time, let's say she's 37, she's not putting out the same amount of estrogen that she was capable at 20. No way. So she's putting out less estrogen, but she's putting out even less progesterone, even though she ovulated, and she's putting out a rich amount of progesterone because she did ovulate. Her periods still are regular. She's putting out less progesterone, so she's not balancing that estrogen. So she's getting estrogen dominance, which means is the stimulatory effects of estrogen are dominating the calming effects of progesterone because there just isn't as much progesterone output, even though she's still ovulating and she's still putting out a robust amount of progesterone. We describe this very in depth in the book.
You do indeed, and it's written to where it's very understandable, very well written.
Now, let me give you another common example. Another mild-mannered question that doesn't take any time to speak of.
Right. And then what you sent me this morning, oh my God, I almost fell off my chair.
We've been receiving a lot of questions, so I sent Carolyn a screenshot of a lot of the questions that I had failed to send her a couple of days ago. So let me give you another situation. You've got a woman in menopause.
Go ahead.
And she's being treated with estrogen in the form of biased, hopefully. And since physiologically she needs quite a bit more progesterone, milligram for milligram, you're not giving her enough progesterone to balance the amount of estrogen you're giving her. Well, how do we learn that? Very often it's going to show up in symptoms. She's going to have symptoms of estrogen overstimulation that she's not balanced by the progesterone. And therefore, she's going to start being irritable and retain fluid and get some breast tenderness. She's not getting a proper balance by the progesterone. So what do? We jack up the amount of progesterone we treat her with, and we're asking her body with topical progesterone to absorb a lot more progesterone milligram per milligram than we are estrogen. Like, for example, the bias that we give to women, it's 30 milligrams per milliliter. The progesterone we give to women is 200 milligrams per milliliter. Because from milligram per milligram, a woman's body is used to a heck of a lot more milligrams of progesterone. So it's a challenge. And sometimes we'll switch to oral just to even get her extra progesterone. So
Right.
That is some insight into estrogen dominance. And what it comes down to, if a woman's having symptoms of overstimulating by estrogen, we want to address it, whether she's 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 55, 75. We want to pick up on that estrogen dominance. That means breast tenderness, breast pain, breast enlargement. That means if she's young, uterine cramps, PMS, even endometriosis. We want to pick up on that estrogen dominance, and we want to address it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. We can go on that one. But this is also an interesting question, I think. Why is it that some women do not absorb the creams or oils? This woman is writing, I do not, but I don't have alligator skin, and I think women know what I mean by that. So some of us just do not seem to absorb these creams or oils. So I'm thinking of changing to injections. I'm wondering your thoughts on both and how you feel about that and how you feel about injections. If we don't absorb the creams well or the oils well, A, why? And then B, what do you do?
Well, I'd like to open it by saying I started out early in my career not using creams, but creams are not a lot different than the gels I was using. And in the world of estrogen and testosterone, I never, as in NEVER, ran into ultimate absorption problems.
Yeah.
And part of it is knowing what strength to prescribe.
Interesting.
Right out of the gate.
Right.
And then I never mention it to women. Sometimes women need 2 or 3 times the strength for a variety of reasons. I'm not going to go into those right now. But I never said to the woman, oh, you're having troubles here. You're not absorbing it. I just doubled or tripled the strength. Because ultimately, if we were not alleviating symptoms, we made it stronger. And by the time we tested them, I never had to go more than doubling the strength, by the way. I didn't have to go to tripling the strength. I just made that up right now. I've never had to do that. So you never say to a woman, oh, you're a poor absorber or whatever, or you need more. You just figure out what she needs. So when we switched to the oils, we started seeing better absorption for most women. So I've never run into a case in the world of estrogen or testosterone that we didn't get good absorption. So I wonder what the heck's going on there. And my suspicion is the milligrams per milliliter is not proper. The dosage is not proper. So I'd have to know more. And then we confirm it by testing. I'm not just making this up.
Right.
We ultimately see it on testing. And so after 25 years, my God, have we got the dosage strengths dialed in. And yes, woman for woman, woman by woman, you have your own individual needs. You have your own individual ability to absorb. You have your own sensitivity. There's a lot of variables there. So there's a wide range of how much estrogen, for example, a woman needs, biased. Some women don't need very much. Other women need quite a bit. It's based on a lot of moving parts there, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter. We just start with a dose. We gradually increase the dosage and we watch you alleviate symptoms of insufficiency, and we eventually test you. So it doesn't even matter. So I am wondering, what the heck's going on? Am I a fan of shots? No, because I've never had to use them with women. So why in the world? So I'd say that I would, are shots a great long-term? No. For one thing, you're going to get pure estradiol. As far as I know, no one is compounding injectable biased. And then who wants to inject? So
Yeah.
I just have never seen an issue where absorption was the other issue, absorption was the problem. So I'd want to know more about you. What's the milligrams per milliliter? Where are you applying it on your skin? It would be a first case where I never have once thought of changing to injections. I'm not adverse to injections, but I never once, 25 years, thought of, oh my God, the woman's not getting enough estrogen or she's not getting enough testosterone. Oh my God, maybe we should think in terms of injection. I've never thought of that because I've never had to. Women always absorb it. It's just hitting it right.
Got it. And, that's a really good explanation because it's very common that it comes up. Well, I just don't absorb well. I'm being told I don't absorb well. I know I don't absorb well. Well, I don't absorb well, and it makes me wonder because, if you put Vaseline all over your arm, the droplets are just going to slide right off. That's not a natural skin thing. We absorb stuff, right? It's like the skin is like a big mouth. We kind of absorb things. So just to me as the lay person, somewhat, it didn't really seem to make too much sense. But you've answered that really eloquently. Milligram and milliliters and adjusting dosages, leading us back to doing the doctor shopping and finding people who are
really know what they're doing, really know what they're prescribing, really instructing the women properly. I've just never run into a need to inject estrogens or testosterone. And progesterones, you can give it orally if you can't get the dosages high enough. You can get the dosages high enough. And DHEA is so simple, it's hardly worth talking about.
Okay, so we won't. We'll move on to the next one. Here we go on a good one. I am on a particular protocol, and I would like to stop this protocol to pursue a different method. Now, piggybacking on that, another woman asked, and she asked right up here too, she is saying, what is your feeling about this particular protocol? And how do you feel about bringing a woman's period back? We know you never say never. So there's that question. And then there's the question above of the woman who is on this protocol. She's taking very high doses of estrogen. And so there are two questions there in one, both separate, but they both have to do with this protocol. So can we start with how you feel about dosing with very high doses of estrogen to bring a period back?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next question.
Okay, I'll answer.
No, I will answer.
That's not what you wanted?
Menopausal women, the basic question is, you've lost your ovarian hormones. What's the optimal amount for you to replenish them at? For example, is it important for you to replenish your low estrogens and progesterone and testosterone to youthful levels? What's the right amount? And so we have carefully zeroed in on that question. And let me tell you the minimal amount. Let's just talk about estrogens. And in fact, let's even name our favorite biased combination of estriol and estradiol. What's the minimal amount a woman should be taking? Well, we could say one thing, that if a woman's having hot flashes and she's waking up in the middle of the night and she can't go back to sleep, and it's just crunching her mood and her ability to function and her energy, we could say, well, we sure want, a lot of that is low estrogen. So we certainly want to say, well, let's keep increasing the dose until you're not waking up in the middle of the night. You're not having hot flashes, which are mostly estrogen deficiency. Your mood's not gone into severe anxiety and depression, and you're getting enough sleep and you feel good. Let's give you enough dose of estrogen to do that, accomplish that. Then the question is that enough? And the answer is 50% of the time it's not. Even though the common knowledge out there that you're going to encounter is all you have to do is gradually increase the amount of estrogen, for example, until you're alleviating symptoms, and that's the right amount. That's wrong.
Right.
That's not correct. How do I know that? Well, I took 1 year, I did a study of 54 of my patients that came to me and said, oh, goodness gracious, I feel better. My symptoms are gone. And of course, at that point, we test women with the 24-hour urine hormone test. Oh, did I mention the 24-hour urine hormone test? Did I mention that nothing else is acceptable to me at this point in history? That includes the urine 5-point, that includes saliva, that includes blood, not for ovarian hormones. We did the 24-hour urine hormone test. And what did we learn? That 25% of the women who reported, I feel, thank you so much, 25% of those women were in an optimal zone.
They were, yes.
They were 25%. And 50% of them actually did not have sufficient amount of estrogen in their body.
But they felt well.
They felt well. But 50% of them didn't have enough estrogen in their body. And 25% of them had estrogen that was what we would consider to be excessive, in the sense that they could put their breasts at risk for breast glandular cell proliferation, as occurs in a young woman every cycle. Well, how in the world did we declare, yeah, you felt good, but 50% of you didn't have enough estrogen? How in the world did I define that? Well, I went into the medical literature and found studies that I thought were very intelligently designed. They were asking the question, how much is enough estrogen? And one of the parameters they used, enough estrogen to prevent vaginal atrophy. Yeah, because you do not want to have vaginal atrophy over the course of your lifetime. And if you don't have enough estrogen, you're going to get vaginal atrophy. You're going to get thinning of the vagina. It's going to show up if you're having a woman having sexual intercourse. You're going to start having pain on intercourse. You're going to feel the dryness. You're going to start using a lube. In fact, when a woman tells me, well, I never used to have to use a lubrication, and I'll ask her, are you having sexual intercourse? Yes. Are you needing a lubricant? Yes, I have for the last 3 years. What I know for sure is she's developing vaginal atrophy. And we don't want that.
No.
That's not enough.
No.
And then it turns out that if a woman is developing vaginal atrophy, we already know that she doesn't have enough estrogen to protect her bones. Because it turns out from the medical literature, from studies that have been done, is that you have to have enough estrogen in your body when you're in menopause to prevent vaginal atrophy. And if you are preventing vaginal atrophy, if you're getting decent vaginal health, you don't have to have the vaginal health you had when you were 25. But you need to have decent vaginal health. And I sort of call it if you're still using lubricant, then you better have a pelvic exam that you can at least see that the mucosa is healthy enough. If you're restoring the health of the vagina, you're going to have enough estrogen in your body to prevent bone loss.
Right. So when we talk about cognitive decline, because you've in all this time that I've been interviewing you, one thing that you so wonderfully say is never to say never. And
I see what you're anticipating, but I want to lay a little more background.
Okay.
So we define sufficient estrogen not by Are all your hot flashes gone? No. We define it. Yes, it's great to get rid of your hot flashes and your night sweats and your sleep disturbance for the estrogen component, but that's not enough. We want to know by 24-hour urine hormone testing that you have adequate levels to help preserve your bones and your vagina. That's the bottom line.
Okay.
We do too much. How do we determine too much? I said 25% of the women would have too much, even though they're saying, I feel good. What defines too much? And of course, we go through all this in great detail in our professional training program.
Yes.
Well, every cycle, a young woman, every menstrual cycle prepares for breastfeeding. Every cycle. As if she was going to get pregnant and she was going to need to breastfeed. And how she does that is during the first half of the cycle with that robust estrogen output, she starts getting additional breast glandular cells, extra cells. It's called breast glandular cell proliferation. Her breasts get fuller every single cycle. She may even get some breast tenderness and some nipple tenderness from the stimulation of the extra estrogen. And she actually, how do you get extra cells? You have cell division called mitosis. Does it every month. And if she does not get pregnant, those extra cells that developed, they disappear. They evaporate. I love the name given to that. It's called apoptosis. Those extra cells undergo an apoptosis process and they're gone. And so her breast fullness changes every month in a young, healthy woman. So there's been a case made by a wonderful gynecologist at Princeton saying he doesn't think it's a good thing to put a menopausal woman through mitosis. He calls the upper limit the amount of estrogen it takes to alleviate symptoms, but not so rich that it puts a woman into breast glandular cell proliferation, i.e. cell division, i.e. mitosis, which is a very vulnerable moment because during mitosis, you can get a mutation called moving in the direction of breast cancer. So we don't want to do that. So he thinks it's not wise to do what young women do at the age of 50. Is have monthly breast glandular cell proliferation, i.e. mitosis. So that's how we define the upper limit. And we define it very specifically in numbers in a 24-hour urine hormone test. And just to give you an example, if these are the estrogen levels in a young woman, why is there a range? Some women need a whole bunch of estrogen. Some women don't need so much estrogen and everything in between. But every one of these young women can be healthy, can be regularly menstruating, can undergo the breast glandular cell proliferation every single month. Well, by coincidence, the amount that menopausal women need, we declare, is right below that. When I went into the medical literature and defined what's enough to protect the bones in the vagina, what's enough, but what's not too much is to cause proliferation. It turns out to be one notch below what a young woman needs to menstruate.
That's really interesting. One notch below.
One notch below. And most women are going to do really well all throughout menopause if you replenish the estrogen, for example, to that level. Now, what I actually wanted to do when I defined what's enough, I not only wanted to declare it's enough to keep your bones safe estrogen-wise by this level, it's enough to keep your vagina safe by this level. In order to have enough, we're going to define it by testing. I wanted to include a few other things. I wanted to say, and how much does it take to protect your arteries? And how much does it take to protect your skin? And how much does it take, oh my God, for cognition. One of a very common losses that women have, small, medium, or large. And here's where it gets wobbly, and here's why you said, because you are so familiar with me saying this as many times as I have, you never say never. When a woman has cognitive issues and is heading towards dementia,
right,
we know from medical science that a certain number of women, if you give them richer estrogen levels, that cognitive challenge is going to disappear. So it's always a risk-benefit thing. And so now I want to tell you a story that I've told before. I'm sitting down at the National Academy of Sciences about to present to the commission on the committee on bioidenticals. And I've done some research on the other doctors on my panel that are going to present. And I learned that one of these doctors was on a protocol where her period was restored. And I knew that that was a bugaboo for the committee members for various reasons.
Without a doubt, yeah.
And as she's sitting down, she's a 65-year-old doctor. As she's sitting down, she introduces herself. I introduce, we're about to go live in 2 minutes in front of the committee. And I say to her, I remember looking up at her because she hadn't even sat down yet. I said, are you going to mention that you're on that protocol that's estrogen rich? And I gave the name. And she winked at me and she said, no. She knew it was a bugaboo, so she wasn't going to mention that.
Right.
And then I went out to lunch with her. And she told me this story that when she was in her early 50s, remember she's 65 when we're out to lunch. She's a practicing physician that's starting to get cognitive challenges so severe that she's getting worried that she's not going to be able to continue her livelihood. She's going to have to give up her profession because she's getting mental dropout. She's getting memory issues. And she knew the link between estrogen levels and cognitive. And she's looking down the barrel of this, that her mother has dementia. And her mother's sister had dementia. And here she is, she's losing her ability to think and remember in her early 50s. She's looking down at the probability that she's going to get dementia too. So what she did is she started taking estrogen. And she kept on increasing the estrogen, and she kept on realizing that she was getting her cognition back. And she went so high till her brain cleared and she started menstruating again. And I'm sitting there having lunch with her and I'm starting to get teary-eyed because here I am sitting in front of a human being who cleared up her own dementia, and it required these extremely robust levels of estrogen to do it, enough that restored her period. And I'm not saying boo, other than being so grateful that that was available to her. Right. So what this takes us down to is this. What it takes to restore or sustain a period in a menopausal woman is you've got to take estrogen levels so high that you're going to produce 24-hour urine hormone results that are anywhere between 3 and 8 times what a young woman has. The upper limit of normal, not the average, the upper limit of normal, 3 to 8 times. How do I know that? I've tested women on this protocol. I even showed the originator of this protocol the actual test results. And because of that breast glandular cell proliferation, one could make a case that this is not the best thing to do in a menopausal woman, especially since in most women, you can get all the advantages you need without ever having to put them at risk for breast glandular cell proliferation. 3 to 8 times the upper limit of normal. But you never say never. I'm sitting there listening to that story with tears in my eyes. This dynamic, brilliant, clear as a bell, 65-year-old woman who's in active practice, along with her son was there as well. So what I'm saying is it all comes down to the individual woman. There is no ultimate rules. 98% of the women that I've ever treated, I've never had to go beyond into youthful levels of estrogen, for example. They didn't need it. They got happy. They had vaginal protection. They had a bone protection. They had cognitive restoration, and we did less than youthful levels. But you never say never. Sometimes you push it. And when you're talking about cognition, we push it all the way to see if that'll restore. Now, there's many other moving parts for some people who have cognitive decline / dementia / Alzheimer's. So we don't leave it at that. There's a phenomenal book by Dr. Dale Bredesen called The End of Alzheimer's. So if anyone's having cognitive decline, but in a menopausal woman, we never start with the full Bredesen protocol. We start richening up that estrogen and starting to see if they'll get cognitive return. So yeah, we're getting into the weeds of technicality, but
yeah,
it all comes down to individualization with every individual woman. There are no ultimate rules. It's always risk benefit. So that's my simple reply.
Right. Someone is writing to us, Safia. Good morning. She's saying, is it safe? And she's asking, reply, please. We just did.
Well, let me elaborate on that.
Yeah, I was going to just
Number one, human life is so extraordinarily phenomenal. It's just incredible.
It's
what
true.
we can do and how many moving parts there are that could lead towards health. That's our genetic propensity, is health. But is life on Earth safe? No. Life on Earth is not safe. For example, every one of us are vulnerable to 1,000 diagnoses, including cancer, including diagnoses so severe we could leave Earth from the diagnoses themselves. Life on Earth is not safe. And when you get down into anyone who's developing symptoms, it always comes down to, let's examine the various parts that relate to this. In medicine, it's known as a risk-benefit analysis. And you know what? The answer is always there. So are we safe? God, I'm so grateful I woke up this morning. I'm walking and talking and I'm having fun.
Ditto to that. And I've got a history of all of that. And you and I discussed that at the very beginning. And so she also asks, which is something we visit all the time. I think that this requires really a yes or no answer. How many years can we use HRT?
Good question.
Here's
my best medical recommendation based on medical science. The earliest that you can identify hormone depletion, hopefully in your 30s, because that's when it's happening, you go on hormones and you stay on them, as I am. This is my hormones. You stay on them for every day that you're on Earth, and you sing a song or you say a prayer of gratitude every time you apply these hormones for every day you're on Earth. And you make sure you're doing the right dosages, optimal for the retention of your health and your body and your functioning every single day. And that's the science. And Carolyn used to play at the house of an oncologist when she was a little girl. Carolyn was a little girl, if I can tell this story. And your daddy was a doctor, and your daddy had a doctor friend named Dr. Avram Blooming. And Dr. Avram Blooming is an oncologist, and he wrote this book called Estrogen Matter. And it's really about the science of risk. And that crazy recommendation that women should be on the lowest dose possible for the shortest periods of time is the opposite of what's true.
That is true.
Here's what's scientifically true for men and women. We're all at risk for 1,000 diagnoses, including cancer. However, and there's women that are at increased risk for breast cancer, just like men are at increased risk for prostate cancer. And there's reasons for that. However, given all that, given life being risky, given we're all at risk, it's not safe in a certain sort of way.
No, I could walk out my door and get hit by a boulder.
Given all of that, women who are treated with hormones are at less risk for breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than women who are not treated with hormones in menopause. So, moral of the story, the moment you can get the notion and start the process of replenishing your hormones when you need it, do it and stay on it for the whole rest of your life. And then as you're leaving Earth, you'll go, wow, that was a good decision.
Looking back,
as I'm drifting into the transition from being on Earth to being somewhere else.
Glad I made that choice. Glad I met Dr. David Rosensweet. Thank you, God. So really, and many of us feel that way. You're a gem too. You know, I'm going to quickly just say very quickly here that I did have 2 estrogen positive breast cancers. I did go 17 years without hormones. I do take hormones. I'm going into my 3rd year. I do this very carefully. I feel very well. All of my cancer numbers, very oddly, went down. I mean, they were great anyway, but since taking hormones, they all went down. This is my own story. Responding to someone who said, do you recommend HRT following surgical menopause with the BRCA mutation? I had a radical hysterectomy as well. 2 breast cancers, chemo, radiation, radical hysterectomy. It was a nightmare. 17 years later, got onto hormones. I feel a lot better for me. So the moral of that story is what Dr. R and I talk about all the time, and that is please read the book Happy Healthy Hormones. Please read the book Estrogen Matters. Please do the doctor shopping. Find someone that you can connect with well, trust, and God bless, you know, because I know what feels what way, and it did not feel very good without hormones, I gotta tell you. So risk benefit is a big deal, and it takes thought, and it takes trust, and it takes faith, and yes, those affirmations and close your eyes and those prayers when you're applying your hormones and all of that stuff. There, I've spoken. Back to you, Dr. R. This is a question interesting to me. They're all interesting, but can you tell me or explain to me how it is I can tell if I have gone through menopause? I have no symptoms at all. All these other women have all this kind of this or that and the other stuff. I don't have any of that, and I really need some answers here, she's saying.
And scientifically and statistically, 25% of the women who go into menopause don't have symptoms. 75% do, but 25% do not. And it's you that I am most concerned about, because the 75% of women who develop these life-disruptive symptoms, small, medium, or large, they're motivated. They're going to reach out there and try and get help of some kind because it's too life-disruptive.
Yeah, it's
25% of you are sitting back going, I'm through menopause. I'm not having any problem at all. I don't understand why you were having your thing. But here's what's true for 100% of the women. You peak on your hormone levels from your ovary when you're 20, plus or minus a couple years. You gradually decline for a while. And then in your mid-30s or mid-40s, or certainly by your early 50s, you have a precipitous decline. The ovaries stop doing it. 100% of you women, those ovaries turn off entirely. No estrogen, no testosterone to speak of. You get a little bit from your adrenals for a while, but not for very long. No progesterone to speak of. And this is tremendously consequential, whether you've ever had a symptom or you don't. And it's the women who don't have those symptoms that I'm most concerned about. Let me tell you why. And I've told this story many times, but this is how impressive it was. I can picture myself in 1968, a senior medical student with my white coat and my stethoscope.
Long coat.
Sitting, short coat, God.
Senior short coat. You got the
medical students, we had to wear the short coat. We didn't get the long coats. I'm sitting there in this noon lecture at the University of Michigan Hospital, and we're getting a lecture from a gerontologist. This is someone who specializes in old age. And he said, senior medical students, you know thousands of diagnoses. Isn't that terrific? Let me tell you what's really happening with old people. They're losing their muscle. They can't stand or walk with stability. They fall on their osteoporotic hips, and in those days, they die. You want to do something for old people? Prevent that muscle loss and that bone loss. This is what's happening to every single woman. There isn't exceptions to this, or they're very rare. And exercise will carry some of you a little ways, but not much. You want to stay out of assisted living facilities? You want to stay out of adult diapers? The greatest percentage of you are going to need to preserve your muscles and your bones. You're going to need to preserve your bladder, and you're not going to want to get incontinent and wind up with adult diapers, because that's sort of a definitive issue. And you're going to want to stay out of walkers in wheelchairs, because that's where the moment where a lot of women transition to assisted living facilities and they have to leave homes. How are you going to do that? Exercise is going to help you, but you're going to need to replenish your ovarian hormones.
I wish I had a loudspeaker of you and I could just stick it somewhere so that the women that I deal with and live with could hear this, like subliminally at least. It makes me cuckoo. Anyway, that's my own deal. But I mean, they just are very frightened of hormones. And we know why.
We know why. And that's the thing that's so critical. That's what you're up against. There was false, incorrect, opposite of what is true information that exploded onto the American and world public in 2002 with this Women's Health Initiative that incorrectly said there was increased risk at a time when the study really showed there was not increased risk.
Right.
Breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke. But that didn't matter.
No.
The press and that funky part of that committee, the committee's leader, God, the man had to be a misogynist, I think.
Yeah.
He had it somewhere in his head that hormones were not okay for women. So he wanted to drive that, even though the science didn't say that.
Right.
And even though that original committee retracted that study in 2017, and they put out a study, the same committee put out in the same journal, the Journal of the American Medical Association, that after 18 years of follow-up, there was no increased risk of breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke. Oh, yeah. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you.
The waters in 2002, and you're not getting that kind of information out there. Well, it's creeping out there. But the thing I want to say, back to what we were talking about, especially if I can remember it.
Do you want me to help you?
Is women who are not getting the symptoms, you're the most vulnerable because you have no inspiration. And you make statements like, and I hear them all the time, I'm through menopause.
Yes, I was just going to say.
No, there's no such thing as being through menopause. Your hormones start declining in your early 20s. Then they drop really low. So the moment you have your last period or your period starts spacing out to 2 months, I can tell you what's going on with your hormones. We never bothered to test you because we tested you and we see that, oh, lo and behold, her periods stop. What's her estrogen level? What's her testosterone level? What's your progesterone level? They're zilch. They're no good. They're not there. There's not enough. So if you want a certain date, a date certain, just think of when your last period was. If it was a year ago, your hormone levels are disastrously low. And if you if you had regular periods and then you're starting to get them every 2 months or unpredictable, your hormone levels are tremendously low, whether you have symptoms or not. and they stay low, and they keep on declining into your 70s and 80s and 90s. And how do we know that? Because we have tested women in their 80s and 90s. And I'm telling you, these things are zilch, and that is not okay. So don't take solace with you're not having symptoms or I'm through menopause. I had hot flashes for a year and they're gone.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
that's the thing I'm most concerned about, because you have no inspiration, but you're as vulnerable as a woman with severe symptoms. You are as vulnerable as a woman who's having severe hot flashes and can't sleep and has mood disorder as she is to the dramatic effects from not having enough estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and DHEA. You're going to get that muscle loss. You're going to lose that bladder control, high likelihood. You're going to need to switch from walking to a cane and then a walker, and then a wheelchair. You're going to most likely wind up with adult diapers. This is what's happening to older people. Take a look around when you're walking around. Take a look at their thighs. What happened to their thighs? Why did they get so thin? Why are they walking with canes? They lost their muscles, sarcopenia, because they lost their androgens. Why are they in adult diapers? Because they had lost their muscles that hold up the bladder, and they wound up with vaginal atrophy because of the low estrogens. Not to mention their cognition, their arteries, etc. So, oh my God, the drum beat goes on. So to return to your question, I'm through menopause, or I never had trouble with menopause. Ooh, you're the ones I'm most concerned about.
It's very hard to say that.
Low as everyone else.
And I'm kind of known as the crazy menopause lady around here. I am. But I got to tell you, a few months down the way, people start coming to my door and they're like, And
you know what? You know what, Carolyn Shapiro?
It is 8:02. That hard stop was not so hard today, Dr. R. We went 2 minutes over.
And my God, I've got my next thing that's happening right as we speak. So, as always, it's such a pleasure and fun.
It is fun.
With you. And until next Tuesday, right?
Yeah, I got my work cut out for me, boy. I'll tell you this weekend. I'm going to have a ball.
And to everyone out there, thank you. I so enjoyed this with Carolyn. And we're going to keep doing it. So
definitely fun. Got lots of questions, and I'm sorry we can't answer them. We got to go. But much love to all of you ladies. We will get to these questions. Honest to God, we will. And if you hang around, you'll see that. Dr. R, always thank you. Have a fabulous weekend. God bless to you and all the women. Basta, and we'll see you on Tuesday.